The message had been traveling through space for many days before anyone even noticed it. It was old-fashioned, weak, and full of static, the kind of signal most modern civilizations ignored. But for the small, gentle species called the Varan, it was the only hope they had left. The Varan came from a quiet world covered in soft grasslands, wide rivers, and glowing trees that lit up during the night. Their cities were built low to the ground, shaped like smooth domes that blended into the land. They lived simple lives, farming, weaving, singing, and learning about the world around them. They had never built warships, never trained armies, and never imagined they would need to. For generations, they believed in peace. For generations, peace had been enough. But everything changed when the raiders arrived. The Varan didn't know where the raiders came from. They only knew that one day a large shadow appeared in the sky above the outer settlements, and the next day, entire villages were empty. The raiders didn't destroy the buildings or the farms. They simply took what they wanted: supplies, machines, and sometimes people who never returned not at first. The Varan hoped the raiders would leave on their own. They sent messages asking for negotiations, but the raiders never responded. They only came back again and again, each time taking more, becoming bolder. The Varan guards tried to stop them, but their small patrol ships were no match for the raiders' heavy crafts. One patrol ship after another was disabled and abandoned. The Varan Council gathered in their tall, glowing hall to talk about what to do. They were worried, confused, and scared. The counselors spoke softly, their antennae trembling as they discussed how many more settlements could fall before their whole world was lost. Finally, the council agreed they had no choice. They had to ask for help, so they assembled a message, a long cry for aid, and sent it through every communication channel they knew. They sent it to friendly worlds, to neutral ones, and even to faraway countries that barely knew they existed. They waited for replies, but none came. Most advanced species didn't want to face the raiders. Others simply didn't want to get involved in someone else's problem. And some civilizations never even saw the message because it was too weak or too old-fashioned to catch their attention. The Varan began to lose hope. One evening, after another raid on a farming district, an elder on the council suggested using a very old emergency line. It was a subspace network built a long time ago by ancient travelers who no longer existed. Most people didn't use it anymore because it was slow and unstable, but the council agreed they had no other choice. They sent the message again. Then they waited. Days passed. Nothing happened. The Varan returned to their daily routines, though everyone moved with a quiet sadness. The farmers still worked the fields, but they kept looking over their shoulders. The young stayed close to their homes. The council continued meeting every morning, checking the sky for any sign of help. The raiders kept coming. The council tried to stay hopeful. But deep down, each of them felt the same fear that help might never arrive, and their world might fall piece by piece. Then, one morning, the long-range scanners at the hilltop observatory detected something unusual. A young technician, half asleep from a long night shift, stared at the screens in confusion. A small group of ships had entered their star system. They were moving faster than anything the Varan had ever seen. At first, the technician thought it must be the raiders returning. But the scanners showed something strange. The raider ships were long, dark, and jagged, like floating blades. These new ships were smooth and shaped more like arrows. They traveled in a tight formation, steady and calm, almost like a flock of birds. The technician called the council immediately. Within an hour, the council hall was full of movement. Everyone was asking questions. Who were they? Why were they here? Were they friendly? Did they come to help? Or did they come to take advantage of the Varan's weakened state? The counselors watched the ships approach on the holographic display. The ships slowed as they neared the planet, broadcasting a message in a deep, clear voice that echoed around the hall. "This is the Terran Expeditionary Response Group. We received your distress call. We are here to assist." The council exchanged confused looks. Terrans? The Varren had heard the name only once or twice in old travel logs, and even then only in whispers. Some logs described them as brave explorers. Others called them unpredictable. And a few described humans Terrans as a species from a dangerous world, a world full of storms, predators, and harsh climates that forced them to become tough and resourceful. No one really knew which stories were true. But the Terrans' reputation always carried a sense of caution. They were strong, determined, and far more capable of dealing with danger than most species in the galaxy that the Varren had never met. Now several Terran ships were entering orbit above their home. The council quickly arranged a landing site. They decorated the area with bright cloths and glowing ornaments as a sign of welcome, though their hands shook as they worked. They didn't know what these new arrivals would be like. They didn't know how humans spoke, how they behaved, or what they expected. Some Varren whispered that humans might be rough and loud. Others wondered if they were kind. A few feared they might not be friendly at all, but there was no turning back. Terran shuttle finally descended through the atmosphere. Many Varren gathered to watch. The shuttle was small but sturdy-looking, and it landed with a smoothness that surprised everyone. The door opened, letting out a burst of cool, filtered air. Then the humans stepped out. The Varren gasped softly. Humans were much taller than the Varren, and they moved with a slow, confident ease. Their uniforms were simple but tough-looking, full of pockets and gear. Their boots made firm sounds on the landing pads. Their faces carried a look the Varren didn't fully understand, a mix of calm, determination, and something like gentle worry. The Varren expected harsh voices or impatient attitudes, but instead, the humans greeted them with polite nods. The leader stepped forward and introduced himself in a warm, steady voice. "We came because you asked for help," the human said. "And we don't ignore a call like that." Many Varren felt a wave of relief mixed with something else, too. Respect, maybe. Or gratitude. Or perhaps it was the feeling of seeing hope appear in a moment when everything seemed lost. But then a troubling thought passed through the council's minds. If they accepted human help, would the raiders become more aggressive? Would the humans bring more trouble? Would this new conflict grow into something bigger than their peaceful world could handle? One counselor, voice trembling, asked the question aloud. "Are you sure you want to do this? Our world is small. We don't want to involve your people in danger." The human leader met their eyes and gave a calm, almost gentle smile. "We understand the risk, but we don't leave people to struggle alone." "You called." We answered. The Varren looked at one another. In all their years, no one had ever spoken to them like that. No one had ever stepped onto their land with such courage and such simple, matter-of-fact kindness. They had pleaded for help, but they had never expected these people to come as the Terrans began unloading equipment and scanning the sky for raider activity. The Varren realized they were witnessing the start of something far bigger than a rescue mission. These humans, these Deathworlders, as some species called them, were unlike anyone they had ever met. Strong, calm, and unafraid. And they had come not for rewards, not for power, but because someone had asked for help. The Varren didn't know it yet, but their world was about to change forever. When the Terran ships settled into orbit, the Varren world felt strangely silent. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was more like everyone was holding their breath, unsure what was coming next. For a species that spent most of its history studying plants, building art, and caring for their land, meeting humans felt like stepping into a storybook with pages they had never dared to open. The human team spent their first few hours studying the atmosphere, checking air pressure, and doing things the Varen did not fully understand. To the Varen, the humans looked almost too steady, like they were built for challenges. Their eyes moved sharply from one detail to another. Their uniforms had scratches and faded patches that hinted at long journeys and hard work. Even their posture carried a certain readiness, like they were always prepared for something unexpected. A Varen council stood nearby, watching with polite curiosity. They whispered among themselves about how different humans looked from the pictures in the old travel logs. The logs never said humans could be so calm, so focused, or that they would speak with such gentle confidence. Some Varen expected them to be loud or impatient, but the humans moved with quiet purpose. After some preparations, the humans and Varen met in a circular clearing near the landing site. The grass there was soft and glowing faintly blue, the way it always did when touched by the morning light. The hum of insects filled the air. The setting felt peaceful, so peaceful that it made the difference between the two species even more obvious. The human leader stepped forward and greeted the council again. Their voice was calm, not rushed, not forced. The Varen appreciated that. They were sensitive to tone, and they could sense that the humans were being sincere. "We're here to help you," the human leader said. "We understand you're in danger. Tell us everything you can." The council looked at one another in confusion. They didn't know where to begin. Finally, one elderly counselor stepped forward. Their voice shook slightly as they started explaining the first raid, how the outer settlements were taken by surprise, how people had disappeared. They described the fear that spread across the land, and how the Varen had no fighters, no defenses, no way to protect themselves. The humans listened without interrupting, their expressions soft, not out of pity, but out of understanding. It was clear they had seen hardship before. To them, danger wasn't a strange or distant concept. It was something they had learned to face, again and again. When the council finished speaking, the human leader responded with a steady and reassuring tone. "We'll need to study the raiders' patterns. We'll place scouts in the sky and on the ground. We'll protect your settlements and guide your people to safer areas." The Varen didn't know what scouts meant, but the confidence in the human's voice made them trust the plan. Still, a smaller counselor raised a trembling hand. "We're worried," they said softly. "If the raiders see you helping us, won't they become more aggressive? We don't want you to be harmed because of us." The human leader gave a faint smile, the kind that carried more warmth than words. "We're used to facing danger," they said. "It's not something we enjoy, but it's something we handle. You asked for help. We came. That's what matters." That reply left the Varen nearly speechless. In their culture, no one ever took risks for strangers. They always tried to keep peace by avoiding conflict, not by stepping into it. But the humans seemed different. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't bravado. It was something deeper, something built into them. A group of curious Varen children approached from behind the council, peeking from the tall grass. They were told to stay back, but children were always curious. They stared at the humans' boots, their gloves, their helmets, and especially their faces. To them, humans looked almost like storybook explorers who wandered through unknown lands and returned with tales of adventure. One child asked in a small voice, "Do your homes look like ours?" The humans looked down, surprised but amused. "No," one human replied kindly. "Our homes look very different. Our world is full of storms and tall mountains and strange creatures. But it's beautiful in its own way." The Varen children listened with wide eyes. They had never traveled to other worlds. Their species rarely left their home planet, and the idea of a world filled with storms sounded frightening. But the humans spoke about it with a strange fondness, as if challenges were just another part of life. Some adults found it hard to understand how a species could grow so calm in the face of danger. But the more time they spent near the humans, The more they sensed a deeper truth. These people were shaped by a world that never went easy on them. It wasn't that humans liked conflict. They were simply trained by life itself to survive it. As the day continued, humans set up their base near the clearing. They unloaded equipment, small devices that glowed softly, boxes with blinking lights, tools that folded into different shapes. The Varen watched in amazement. Humans seemed to know exactly where to place each piece of equipment, communicating with short, simple phrases. Everything moved so quickly, yet so smoothly. One human technician scanned the sky with a handheld device. "We're picking up unusual energy patterns," they said. "The raiders have been here recently." The council stiffened. They had hoped for more time before the next attack. But the humans did not look alarmed. They simply nodded, shared a few words among themselves, and adjusted their devices. "We'll put up early warning sensors," a human engineer said. "If the raiders return, we'll know before they even enter the atmosphere." To the Varen, this sounded almost like magic. Their own technology could track stars and storms, but it couldn't sense incoming danger with such precision. Some Varen engineers politely asked how the sensors worked. The humans tried to explain in simple terms, but the concepts were still a little too complex. Even so, the Varen appreciated the effort. Throughout the afternoon, small groups of Varen arrived to watch from a distance. They whispered among themselves about the humans' movements, their courage, and the way they seemed alert without being afraid. The Varen were cautious by nature, but they admired the humans' strength. It was a kind of strength born from experience, not arrogance. As evening approached, the sky turned a soft orange and deep purple. The glowing trees around the clearing lit up gently, casting warm light over everyone. The humans stopped briefly to look around, clearly moved by the beauty of the place. "This world is incredible," one human said quietly. "It deserves to be protected." That simple sentence made several Varen lower their heads, touched. It had been a long time since anyone from another world admired their home, let alone cared enough to protect it. When night fell, a soft breeze moved through the clearing. The Varen Council and the humans shared a simple meal, local fruits and breads that the humans adapted to safely. The mood was peaceful, though under the surface, both groups understood the seriousness of the situation. The raiders were still out there. They could return at any moment. But now, the Varen were not alone. As the humans prepared to rest, the council thanked them again. "You came when no one else did," an elder said. "We don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay us," a human leader replied. "You asked for help. That's enough." The elder bowed their head. "We didn't know who would answer our call," they said softly. "We didn't expect it would be people like you." The human gave a gentle smile. "Sometimes help comes from places you don't expect." With that, the camp grew quiet. The humans stayed alert, their devices watching the sky, their senses sharp even in the calm night. The Varen returned to their homes, hearts a little lighter, steps a little steadier. The world still felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, the Varen felt hope glowing inside them, soft, steady, and warm. Like the trees that lit the night, they didn't fully understand the humans yet. They didn't know how far these strangers were willing to go to protect them. But they could already feel it. Human beings were unlike anyone else, and their arrival was only the beginning of a story that would change everything. The days that followed the humans' arrival were filled with a quiet energy the Varen had never experienced. The raiders still lurked in the darkness, somewhere out there in the distant stars. But for the first time in weeks, the Varen felt a sense of calm. They had no illusions that the danger was gone, but they were no longer alone in their fight. The humans didn't waste time. They moved quickly, setting up monitoring stations, spreading out across the land, and gathering information about the raiders. The Varen had never seen anything like it. The humans worked with efficiency and precision, like a well-oiled machine. But there was something else, too, a quiet confidence that made them seem unshackable in the mornings. The Varin watched as human scouts took to the sky, flying sleek. Small ships that darted across the horizon like birds in flight. These ships moved fast, almost too fast for the Varin to follow. But it wasn't just their speed that impressed the Varin. It was the way the humans moved. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. The ships soared through the sky like they knew exactly where they were going. And more importantly, why they were going there. One morning, the human leader called a meeting with the council. The air was crisp, and the sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the landscape. The Varin gathered in their usual place, a wide, open hall made of smooth stone and surrounded by tall trees. They sat on low cushions, a sign of respect and calm. "We've been monitoring the raiders," the human leader began, her voice steady and clear. "We've picked up a few of their ships on our radar. It looks like they're planning another attack on one of your settlements." The council members exchanged nervous glances. The idea that the raiders were still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike, filled them with dread. The Varin had never been warriors. They had never learned to fight like the humans had, but the human leader didn't seem worried. She continued speaking as if everything was under control. "We'll need to move quickly," she said. "Our scouts have located the raider ships. They're still at least a few hours away, but that gives us some time." The council sat in silence, processing the information. They could see the calm confidence in the humans' eyes, and it was contagious. For the first time in a long while, the Varin felt like there was hope, real hope, that they might survive this. "What do you need from us?" one of the Varin council members asked. Their voice was filled with uncertainty, but also a quiet resolve. They understood now that this wasn't just about the humans helping them. It was about everyone working together. "We'll need local guides to help us move through the terrain," the human leader said. "We also need you to help coordinate with your people. This is going to be a team effort." The Varin council nodded. They had no experience with the kind of battle the humans were preparing for, but they understood the value of teamwork. The humans made it clear that they were here to work with them, not above them. That realization brought a strange sense of comfort. Over the next few hours, the Varin began to organize. They sent word to the settlements in the area, alerting them to the coming danger and the humans' plan. They gathered a group of local guides, farmers, hunters, and elders who knew the land better than anyone else. These guides would lead the humans through the dense forests, across rivers, and up into the hills where the raiders had been known to hide. The humans also began preparing their equipment. The Varin watched in awe as they unloaded advanced tools and weapons from their ship's strange devices that glowed and hummed with an energy the Varin had never seen before. There were long-range communication devices, handheld scanners, and small drones that hovered quietly in the air. The Varin had never seen technology like this. It was so different from their own peaceful tools, but it was clear the humans knew how to use it all. They worked in a rhythm, moving together as if they had done this many times before. Later that day, a small group of Varin approached the humans' camp. The guides, chosen for their knowledge of the terrain, were ready to help. The humans greeted them with calm smiles, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. The guides weren't warriors, but they were the Varin's best hope of moving quickly and staying hidden in the thick forests. "We're ready," one of the guides said, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of the situation. "We know these lands well." The human leader nodded and gestured toward her team. "Let's get moving then." The journey to the raiders' hideout was long and difficult. The Varin guides led the humans through narrow paths, over rocky hills, and across dense underbrush. They moved swiftly and silently, using their knowledge of the land to stay hidden from any potential raiders. The humans followed without hesitation, their weapons at the ready, but always moving with the calm precision of people who knew how to survive in hostile environments. As the group advanced deeper into the forest, the Varren couldn't help but notice how easily the humans adapted to the rough terrain. They didn't complain or slow down. Instead, they moved like they were part of the land, flowing through it with purpose. They worked together, helping one another when someone tripped or lost their footing, but there was no sense of panic. Everything was done with a quiet, deliberate focus. The Varren, on the other hand, felt the tension building in their bodies. They weren't used to moving like this, and every crack of a twig underfoot felt like it could give away their position. But the humans didn't seem to care. They walked with their heads held high, unafraid. When they reached a clearing that overlooked the raiders' position, the humans called for a stop. They set up a small base camp, their equipment buzzing to life as they scanned the area for any signs of the raiders. The Varren gathered around, keeping their voices low as they waited for the humans to give the signal. "This is where we make our stand," the human leader said quietly. "We'll wait until nightfall, then we'll move in." The hours passed slowly, but the humans never seemed to lose focus. They checked their equipment, communicated with their ships, and kept their eyes on the horizon. The Varren, in contrast, spent the time nervously watching the forest, straining their ears for any sign of the raiders. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the human leader gathered the group together. "It's time," she said. "Stay close, move quietly, and follow our lead. We're doing this together." The Varren felt a strange mix of fear and trust. They had never been in a situation like this before, but they knew that the humans were their best chance of survival. And for the first time since the raiders arrived, the Varren felt like they weren't just waiting to be saved. They were actively participating in their own future. The humans moved with quiet determination, and the Varren followed, stepping carefully through the thick undergrowth. They didn't know what was coming next, but they knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when they would stand side by side with their unexpected allies. And as the darkness of the night settled around them, they couldn't help but think that, no matter what happened, they had made the right choice. The night was cool and quiet as the group of humans and Varian moved deeper into the forest. The sky above them was filled with soft light from the glowing leaves and distant stars. The Varren guides whispered to one another, pointing out safe paths, hidden routes, and places where the ground sloped sharply. The humans listened carefully, adjusting their steps with surprising ease. They didn't stumble, didn't hesitate, and didn't seem bothered by the uneven terrain. To the Varren, this alone was extraordinary. They were used to walking carefully on their soft lands, but the humans moved with the confidence of people who had walked on much harsher ground. Every time one of the Varrens slipped on a loose stone or brushed against a low branch, a human hand was there to steady them. It wasn't done with impatience or frustration. It was instinct, simple, and natural, as if helping others was something they had practiced their whole lives. The forest slowly thinned, and ahead of them, the land opened into a wide stretch of pale grass. Hidden beyond the grass was the captured Varren settlement, a place that had once been filled with laughter, music, and trade. Now it stood quiet, empty, with dim lights flickering in broken windows. It looked peaceful from a distance, but the silence was not peaceful at all. The humans crouched at the edge of the trees, studying the settlement with keen eyes. Their small drones drifted silently above, casting faint lines of light as they scanned. The Varren watched with awe. Such technology was far beyond anything they had built. Their own devices ran on simple harmony-based energy, beautiful but limited. The human tools, however, were practical, sturdy, and purposeful. "They've set up equipment around the outer buildings," one of the humans murmured softly, looking at a small screen. "Probably monitoring devices." They're watching for anyone who tries to enter. The Varan guides exchanged uneasy looks. They had seen those devices before, silent machines placed by the raiders to keep everyone out. They had never known how to disable them. To approach them usually meant being caught, but the humans didn't seem worried. They talked quietly among themselves, adjusting their equipment and observing every detail of the settlement. "We can get around them," another human said. "We'll split into small teams. Some of us will enter from the left side, the rest from the right. We'll handle the devices quietly." "Quietly?" one of the Varan whispered. "You mean they won't detect you?" "That's the plan," the human leader answered with a faint smile. "We've handled things like this before." Her tone was calm, almost casual, but the Varan felt a weight behind it, something built out of experience. It was strange for them to hear anyone speak about danger in a relaxed voice, but it also made them feel oddly safe. When the humans were ready, they signaled for the Varan guides to follow closely. They moved through the tall grass in silence, their steps slow and carefully placed. The blades of grass brushed softly against their clothes, and the cool air carried the faint smell of damp soil as they approached the settlement. The Varan felt their hearts beating fast. They remembered what the raiders had done to their people, and fear tugged at their chests. But right in front of them were the humans, steady, calm, scanning every angle, every shadow. Their presence alone kept panic from growing. One human raised a hand, signaling everyone to stop. Ahead of them, half hidden behind a broken wall, sat one of the raiders' monitoring devices. It was shaped like a small crystal, spinning slowly and glowing faintly. The Varan had always avoided it, knowing it would sound an alert if disturbed, but the humans didn't hesitate. One of them stepped forward slowly, kneeling beside the device. They pulled out a small box from their pack, tapped a few buttons, and held it near the crystal. After a few seconds, the glowing light faded, and the crystal stopped spinning. "That's one," the human whispered. "Let's keep moving." The Varan stared in disbelief. They had never even imagined the device could be shut off so simply. They whispered among themselves, amazed and relieved. The humans signaled them to continue following. They made their way deeper into the settlement. The houses stood empty, doors hanging open, windows cracked. In some places, furniture was overturned or scattered. The Varan remembered the music festivals that used to take place in these streets, where families would gather and trade handmade treasures. It hurt to see the place so silent, but the humans brought a different kind of energy, focused, determined, almost protective. They checked each corner, each doorway, guiding the Varan through safely. Even in the middle of a place filled with memories of fear, the humans brought a sense of control. At the center of the settlement, they found a large storage hall. Its doors were sealed shut, and strange markings were scratched onto the walls. The Varan guides explained that the raiders had used the hall to store supplies, but no one knew if they were still inside. The humans discussed their plan quietly. One of them examined the door, running their hand along the edges before stepping back. "It's locked from the inside," they said, "but we don't hear movement." The Varan guides looked uncertain. "What if the raiders are hiding inside?" One of them asked. "We'll handle it," the human leader said gently. "Stay behind us." They worked on the door with their tools, and soon it clicked open. The humans pushed it slowly, their movements cautious. When the door swung wide enough, they stepped inside. The Varan waited anxiously behind them. After a few moments, the humans called out, "It's safe." Inside, the hall was dark, with only faint beams of moonlight shining through cracks in the ceiling. Large crates were scattered around. Some contained dried food, some tools, and others items taken from various Varan homes. When the Varan guides saw the belongings, their hearts tightened. They recognized woven baskets, carved figures, small musical instruments, pieces of their lives taken and thrown aside. One of the humans walked over and picked up a small wooden ornament, brushing the dust off it. "This is yours?" they asked the Varen. "Yes," one guide whispered. It belonged to a family that lived on the west side. The human nodded sympathetically. "We'll return everything we can," they said softly. "Nothing stays lost." The Varen felt a warmth in their chest at those words. It wasn't the objects that mattered. It was the respect, the understanding. The humans treated the items not as loot or debris, but as things that carried emotional weight. It was small, but it meant everything got after searching the hall. The humans and Varen moved further through the settlement. The humans found several more devices and disabled them one by one. With each device shut down, the Varen felt a little more in control of their land again. The night grew deeper and the air turned cooler. The humans worked tirelessly, but they never complained. Their focus didn't fade, and they didn't show signs of fear or frustration. They communicated in calm whispers, hand signals, and short sentences. The Varen couldn't understand how humans could stay so composed in such situations. But the more they watched, the more they realized it was part of who humans were. They came from a world with storms, volcanoes, deserts, predators, and challenges the Varen couldn't imagine. They had grown strong because they had no choice. But they had chosen to use that strength to help others. And that was what made them different. By the time they finished clearing the settlement of raider equipment, a soft glow appeared on the horizon. Dawn was beginning to break. The humans and Varen gathered in the center of the settlement, tired but relieved. The humans checked their scanners one last time. "No signs of raiders nearby," one of them said. "For now, this place is safe." "For now," the Varen echoed softly. They knew the danger wasn't over. The raiders were still out there. They could return. But now the Varen had something they didn't have before: guidance, support, and allies who refused to let them face fear alone. The human leader turned to the guides. "We need to rebuild defenses, organize safe routes, move your people to protected areas. This is just the first step." The Varen nodded slowly. "We'll do everything you suggest. You've shown us we can stand with you. We want to help." The human smiled in a warm, almost proud way. "That's good. We're in this together." The Varen looked at the rising sun and felt something they hadn't felt in weeks. Not just hope something stronger. They felt courage. And they knew the humans had given it to them simply by being here. The days after the raid were filled with a steady rhythm of work and planning. The Varen, guided by the humans, began to rebuild the settlement, piece by piece. It wasn't just about restoring what had been destroyed. It was about creating something stronger, something more secure. They worked together, side by side, Varen and humans, their tasks blending into a shared purpose. The Varen, though still not used to the heavy tools and machines the humans used, adapted quickly. The humans were patient, showing them how to use each device, how to set up the new defenses, and how to monitor the surrounding area. It wasn't easy, but there was something deeply satisfying about the progress they made each day. One of the first things the humans taught the Varen was how to set up energy barriers then. Invisible shields that surrounded the settlement, making it far harder for any attackers to break through. The Varen had never seen anything like it before. They had always relied on walls and fences made of natural materials like wood and stone. But these barriers were different. They could move freely within them, but anything trying to get through would be stopped in its tracks. It was as if the barriers were a silent, invisible guard, constantly protecting them. The humans showed them how to maintain these barriers, how to ensure the energy systems stayed charged, and how to repair any damage if the shields were ever breached. The Varen were amazed at how fast the humans understood the systems, how quickly they adapted to new technology. And what surprised them most was how open the humans were about sharing that knowledge. They didn't keep it to themselves as a secret weapon. They taught the Varin everything they needed to know, because, as the human leader often said, we succeed together or not at all. As the days went by, more Varin came to the settlement to help. Word spread through the region that people had a chance, that the humans had helped them fight back the raiders. There was still fear in the hearts of many, but there was also hope. And in a land that had been filled with despair for so long, hope was the strongest force of all. The settlement was slowly becoming something new. The humans had helped the Varin set up a new communication network, connecting the different villages and settlements in the region. They installed simple but effective transmitters that allowed everyone to stay in contact, to share information about the raiders, and to warn each other if danger was near. The Varin were still learning how to use the devices, but the humans were always there, patiently guiding them step by step. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, a small group of Varin approached the human camp. They had been working on a new project gathering food supplies for the coming winter. The Varin were skilled in growing crops and gathering resources, but the humans had shown them better ways to organize their efforts, more efficient techniques for preserving food. One of the Varin, an elder who had seen much of the world, approached the human leader. He had a kind but worried expression on his face. "You have done much for us," he began, his voice heavy with gratitude. "We are safer now? Yes. But I fear we have not done enough. What if the raiders return? What if they bring more ships, more weapons?" The human leader listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. She understood the elder's concerns. They were valid ones. The Varin had come far since the raid, but the threat of the raiders was still very real. The humans had only helped them prepare, but they couldn't guarantee that the raiders wouldn't return. "You've done a lot already," the human leader said gently. "But there's more to be done, yes, and we'll do it together. We can't predict the future, but we can prepare for it. And no matter what happens, we'll face it together." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight of truth. The Varin realized something in that moment. They had not been abandoned. Even when the raiders had come and seemed unstoppable, they had found allies. They had found people who didn't look at them with pity or superiority, but as equals, as partners. The humans weren't just fighting for them. They were fighting with them. That evening, a meeting was called. The Varin gathered with the humans around a large fire that crackled softly in the center of the settlement. The flames danced, casting long shadows across the faces of the people sitting around it. The human leader spoke first, her voice calm and steady, even as the weight of the situation pressed down on them all. "We know the raiders are still out there," she said. "We know they'll likely try again. They're ruthless, and they've been building their forces. But we've prepared. We've built defenses. We've strengthened the settlement. We've connected the communities. And we're ready to fight back if they come." The Varin nodded in agreement. They had come to trust the humans. They believed in their ability to help, and they had learned much. The elder who had spoken earlier rose to his feet, his old bones creaking as he moved, but his eyes were sharp. "We have our own part to play," he said, his voice strong despite his age. "The Varin are not fighters by nature, but we are not weak. We've learned from you. We will protect our homes. We will stand with you." His words stirred something in the hearts of the others. There was no more fear of the unknown. There was only a quiet, growing confidence. The Varin had never considered themselves warriors. They were peaceful people, rooted in the land, living in harmony with nature. But now they understood that. To protect what mattered, families, homes, future, they had to stand strong. The human leader smiled and nodded. "Together," she said simply. "We'll face whatever comes together." The plan that followed was simple but effective. The humans had shown the Varin how to set up patrols, how to monitor their surroundings with the new technology. They taught them how to defend themselves with basic weapons, things the Varen had never had to use before, but now would need. But more importantly, the humans emphasized the importance of communication. It wasn't enough to wait for the raiders to arrive. They had to stay in constant contact with each other, to work together in every way possible. But it was a strange feeling. But the Varen began to look at the humans differently. At first, they had been grateful for the help they had. But now, they saw the humans as equals partners, who had shown them how to fight not with brute force, but with intelligence, organization, and unity. The humans had taught them how to think beyond survival, how to fight for a future worth living. The days turned into weeks, and the settlement grew stronger. The Varen had learned much, and the humans had become part of their community. They didn't stay in the settlement all the time. They often went on scouting missions or helped nearby villages. But they always returned, ready to offer advice, share new strategies, or help when needed. One afternoon, as the humans prepared to leave for a scouting trip, the Varen guides gathered around them. They had a question, one that had been on their minds for some time. "Why?" one of the guides asked softly. "Why do you help us? We are not your people. We are strangers to you." The human leader looked at the guide, her expression serious, but filled with a quiet warmth. "Because you're worth helping," she said simply. "Everyone is worth helping. And in the end, we all have a stake in this. If you fall, we fall. You fall. It's that simple." The Varen looked at each other, feeling something shift deep within them. They weren't alone. They had people who cared, people who believed in them, not because they had to, but because it was the right thing to do. The humans didn't need to explain any further. The Varen understood. They were no longer just survivors, waiting for something to change. They were part of something bigger, something shared. And together, they would face whatever came next, not as separate groups, but as one. As the weeks went by, life in the settlement started to feel normal again. It wasn't the same as before the raid. Nothing would ever be the same, but there was a sense of stability that hadn't been there before. The Varen were rebuilding their homes, their markets, their families. The humans had become an integral part of this process. They weren't just helping, they were living alongside the Varen, sharing in their struggles and triumphs, offering support without any expectation of reward. One day, as the humans and Daji, Varen were working to reinforce the last of the outer defenses, a group of scouts returned with urgent news. The sky was darkening with clouds, and the air felt thick with tension. The scouts had spotted a large group of ships on the horizon, moving swiftly toward the settlement. It wasn't just a few raiders. This time, it looked like a full-scale invasion. Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. The Varen, who had been working so hard to rebuild their lives, paused in their tracks. Fear settled over them like a heavy weight. But the humans didn't panic. Instead, they organized quickly, gathering the Varen together and instructing them to move into the central safe zone. The energy barriers had been reinforced, but it was uncertain whether they could withstand a full-scale attack. The human leader moved through the crowd, her calm voice cutting through the rising tension. "Listen up," she called. "We're ready for this. We've prepared for this. We've trained for this. Everyone has a role, and we'll work together. We're not going to let them take what we've built." Her words were steady, but there was an undeniable fire in her eyes. She wasn't just leading the humans anymore. She was leading everyone. And in that moment, the Varen felt it. They felt the strength, the conviction, and the unity that had been growing between the two groups. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting for a future. The humans quickly distributed weapons and tools to the Varen, who had been trained in their new defense systems. Some of the Varen were nervous, unsure if they could use the weapons properly, but the humans were right there, showing them how to operate everything. They weren't just giving orders, they were teaching, guiding, and working beside them every step of the way. In the distance, the raider ships came closer, dark shapes against the stormy sky. The sound of their engines hummed in the air, a low, menacing growl that grew louder with each passing second. But the Varan stood tall, ready. They had learned. They had adapted, and they were no longer afraid to fight for what was theirs. As the raiders neared, the human leader gave the signal. The Varan activated their newly set-up energy barriers, and a soft hum filled the air as the invisible shields flickered into place. The raider ships tried to move in closer, but the energy walls held strong, forcing the ships to hover just outside the range. The raiders seemed to hesitate, as if surprised by the sudden resistance. The Varan had never put up a defense like this before, but now they had power. They weren't helpless anymore. "We've got this," one of the human soldiers muttered, gripping the handle of his weapon. "Just stay calm. They'll try to push through the barriers. When they do, we hit them hard." The Varan watched as the first raider ship began to approach the shield. It was a large vessel, built for intimidation rather than speed. The ship's weapons began to charge, its guns aimed directly at the energy barrier. The humans had anticipated this, and they were ready. The first shot hit the barrier with a flash of light. The energy field flickered, but didn't break. A second shot, then a third, and still the shield held strong. The raiders' weapons were powerful, but they had never faced anything like this. The humans had made sure the barriers could withstand the worst of what the raiders had. Now, the human leader shouted. The Varan, their hearts pounding, fired the weapons the humans had taught them to use. The first volley of shots was inaccurate, but they didn't need precision. They just needed to cause a distraction. The raiders weren't expecting the Varan to fight back. They had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. The human soldiers moved forward, taking positions along the perimeter of the settlement. They used a mix of handheld weapons and drones to target the raiders, striking fast and hard. The raiders fired back, but their attacks were no match for the combined strength of the humans and Varan. Each shot from the raiders was met with a counterattack, and with every passing minute, their numbers began to dwindle. But the raiders didn't give up easily. They tried to breach the energy barriers by sending smaller ships through the gaps. Some of the ships managed to get through the outer defenses, but they were met with fierce resistance as soon as they touched down on the ground. The Varan fought with everything they had, using their newfound knowledge and weapons to protect their homes. In the chaos, the human leader moved swiftly, directing the Varan where to focus their fire. She wasn't just commanding, she was leading from the front, showing the Varan that they could be brave, that they could fight, too. The Varan, who had been hesitant at first, now stood tall, firing with confidence, watching as the raiders' ships were slowly pushed back. As the battle raged on, the humans and Varan worked seamlessly together, their movements synchronized. It was as if they had been training for this moment for years. The humans had shown them how to fight, but it was the Varan's spirit strong, determined, and unbroken that made the difference. Hours passed, and the raiders, unable to breach the defenses or gain any ground, finally began to retreat. One by one, their ships lifted off the ground, leaving behind the wreckage of their failed assault. The Varan stood victorious there, energy shields still holding strong, their weapons still at the ready. They had the humans walked among them, checking on the wounded, offering encouragement. The Varan who had once been uncertain now stood with pride. They had protected their home, their people, and their future, and they had done it together. As the last of the raiders disappeared over the horizon, the human leader turned to the Varan. Her face was streaked with dirt, and there was a tiredness in her eyes, but her smile was wide and genuine. "You did it," she said simply. "You all did it." The Varan looked around at each other, their faces filled with disbelief at what they had accomplished. They had fought, Yes, but more than that, they had worked together. They had stood side by side with people who had once been strangers. And together, they had defended something more important than just a piece of land. They had defended their right to exist, their right to live in peace. We couldn't have done it without you, one of the Varens said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. You showed us what we're capable of. The human leader nodded. And you showed us what it means to never give up. We're all stronger together. The rest of the humans in Varen gathered around, and for a moment there was a quiet understanding among them all. The battle had been hard, and the fight was far from over. But they had proven something to themselves, to each other, that no one was ever truly alone. Together, they were stronger than any force that could try to tear them apart, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the settlement, the humans. And Varen stood together, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together, with the same strength, the same unity, and the same unbreakable bond that had brought them to this point. And for the first time in a long while, the Varen could say with certainty, they were no longer afraid.